Welcome to new subscribers. It's really good to see everybody here. As ever, I just find it such a privilege to talk to professional athletes and their parents. And this interview is going to be no exception. You're going to get so much from it. As always with these interviews, don't just try and copy what Emily and her mum do. Listen to the principles and then put them into a context, into your context, and help them fit into how your family relates and works together to help your children thrive on their sporting journey. I love the character of Emily and clearly how that's been refined and supported by her parents' epic work to help her be the athlete that she is today. Enjoy this interview. It's one of my favourites. But before I go, if you don't mind hitting that subscribe button and also the notifications, that way you'll get alerted to when more of these interviews become available. Enjoy this brilliant conversation. Well, I'm really pleased to be joined by Jill and Emily Defroand. Emily went to the same school that my older two children, and hopefully the third child will go to. We're all Essex families, but Emily's also pretty good at hockey. And so I'm really thrilled to have Emily and Jill here, partly because I saw Emily speak at my kids' school and she kept mentioning her mum and her dad and her brother in her talk. And so I wanted to get the background story behind that. And also my middle child, Jess, has had the privilege of being on a course with Emily recently about young girls in sport and helping them develop confidence and motivation. So not that I want to hear stories about what my daughter said, because that's private between them, but I do kind of want to hear what's motivating Emily and kind of what she's learned from her mum and dad and brother about it. So ladies, I'm thrilled you're here. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, our pleasure.
Thank you very much for inviting us along.
Yeah.
So my first question is, Jill, Emily's got bundles of confidence, great sense of humour. Who does she get that from, you or her dad?
No, certainly me.
Certainly you, good. Excellent. And now, and tell us a little bit about Emily's hockey journey, because, she's not bad at it. Where did it start? What was it like?
So I think it was always going to be in her blood. I played hockey from school all the way through, and I played up until really Emily started getting involved with the national age group squads. And then it was travelling around weekends, and it really wasn't. So, I played hockey for a very long while locally. And I mean, we're a sportsman family. My two sons, my husband, we love any sport. When the children were younger, they all used to try different sports. But unfortunately, when the boys went off to watch West Ham on a Saturday, Emily would come with me to watch me play hockey, even though she was about age three, I think I remember taking her in a pushchair and leaving her at the pitch side of the pushchair with a couple of the other children of fellow players. And then obviously she was there with the other girls. At half time they would come, and not a 3-year-old, but about sort of 5, 6, they would come and pick up a stick and run up and down the pitch, even though they didn't have a ball, but they felt as if they were part of it. So she's always going to transition hopefully into a hockey player. Emily's a very talented tennis player as well, so there was always this thing about which sport she was going to follow. But at our club, Havering Hockey Club, local hockey club, they had an excellent, and they still have an excellent junior section. So when all the girls and the boys got to about the age of 5, 6, 7, Sunday morning practices, they would go and just learn the basics of the skills. The coaches were players like myself, and we'd just go along. And I think it just developed from there, the love of it. And they used to play on a Sunday. They used to, once a month, they would play against different clubs. And I think it just developed. And I think Emily, liking other sports, she was able to bring in skills and tenacity and teamwork and the will to win from the other sports that she was playing at a reasonably young age. So that's what gave her a little bit of a kickstart. And then she progressed then through the club, through the juniors, and she actually played in the senior team when she was about 11. Is that right? Yes. And we were playing and that was quite nice because there was a cohort of probably 4 or 5 girls whose mothers played as well. So we were playing in the same team together. So the girls did all the running around. The adults were just telling them what to do and running around. But it was very good for them to be able to then be in an environment with their parents, playing with the guidance that they've had all the way through. And then obviously all the girls got better and us mums ended up on the sidelines and not doing very much. But no, that's sort of how it's progressed really.
And as a mum, as a player, with those special, well, I'm going to talk to you in a minute, Emily, but don't worry. It's as a mum, because I've just started playing hockey with my son in the last couple of years, and I haven't played anywhere near to the high stand Emily has, but played kind of Prem A regional stuff. And it's just been the last season, although I was injured a lot and didn't get to play as much, was just the biggest joy to share a pitch with my child.
Absolutely. It was fantastic. I mean, there was always the laughter and the giggles. I had this habit of kept falling over and losing my footing, but it was great. And it was, nice to be able to nurture them into the game. And then obviously the players that we were playing against with other clubs, people would say, oh, not just Emily, but those girls are fantastic. And we'd say, oh, yeah, they belong to us. And they hadn't quite realised that it was mothers and daughters playing in the same team. So,
Emily, what are your memories of those games?
I mean, I'm pleased Mum picked up about falling over all the time, because that is one memory I will always remember. To be fair, I haven't been able to pick up Mum's graceful falling over, but I do remember her falling over pretty much every game. And we had the running joke that, we'd all do the youngsters would do all of the hard work, and then the mums would take the glory by scoring the goals. But honestly, I can hands down say it now, it still remains some of the fondest memories I have within the sport. Those first few years playing women's hockey at Haven Hockey Club, not just with my mum, but my aunt. I got to play in the same team as one of my brothers and my other cousins in a mixed team at Haven. So it was a real family atmosphere. And I think, Mum having the love of the sport throughout her life, as kind of, as she said, it's kind of inevitable that that'd have a knock-on effect to me. And yeah, I loved every minute of it.
Do you think, because obviously you do these couples with Emily on Instagram, which I think by the time this video goes out, you'll be taking a break from it, but I hope it comes back, because you not only have had some high caliber guests on there, but they've just been brilliant conversations. Do you think those early days of just being able to get on with adults and just be sociable has helped you kind of turn into this kind of, obviously you're a very professional hockey player, but you're also just a really easy person to chat to. You obviously get on with people really easily. Do you think those early days of just youth hockey have upskilled you to be able to do that?
Yeah, no, that's really kind of you to say, but as well, like, it's one of those, I think hockey brings you so many opportunities, and some of that is centred around being a team sport. And especially in those younger years, when I was playing in a ladies team at the age of 11, say, it's the learning of, communication, leadership, getting on with other teammates, both on and off the pitch, which is always really important, I think, as part of a team sport. But I completely agree. I think, that learning that I had at such a young age, where I was playing with the likes of Mum and my aunt and some of the other ladies at Haven Hockey Club, has really stood me in good stead moving forwards in my hockey career to date.
That's amazing. I do have a really important question. Did your mum taking you to hockey and saving you from going to Upton Park mean you avoided supporting West Ham, or are you actually a West Ham fan?
This is the question. It depends who's asking me. If my dad's asking me this question, then I do support.
How long you looked around then? Is he listening? Can he?
We got rid of him. He's at golf today. But I am a die-hard Liverpool fan. So, and I have been since probably the age of about 8. Me and my best friend Adele changed allegiance, and I think that's quite a wise decision, if I may say so. But I love football and I love West Ham as well, so I keep Dad happy in that respect.
My in-laws are all West Ham fans, so that's why I asked, because Jess is a West
For
Ham.
everyone, yeah.
So you had this great start, great community feel, great opportunity to be stretched and grow, or whatever, and then and you were doing good at tennis, and shout out to Mr. Duncan from Cooper's School, who is just like tennis, like mad, isn't he? Bless him.
Okay.
At what age then did you have to start scheduling to pursue making hockey the priority? Was that a difficult thought, or was it always going to be hockey? Do you still try and keep the two going now? How did that work? And where were Mum and Dad in that conversation?
Yeah, no, it's a tough decision. I always think I've been very fortunate in terms of, especially my childhood, like, as Mum said, we are a big sports mad family, and actually growing up I had the opportunity to play whatever sport I wanted to play. Mum and Dad were always really supportive. I had my 2 older brothers that would always rope me into the garden to play football with them or cricket with them every weekend. So sport was always a big part of my childhood, but actually, yeah, it probably was maybe my teenage years where tennis and hockey were my main sports. And, you know, every night I'm eternally grateful, but mum would be driving me off to tennis, then we'd be going straight to hockey. And then obviously my brothers had their own commitments within their sports club. So it was mental. So actually, I think I probably did you a favour in choosing hockey. But I'd say probably the decision came when I was starting to get into the national age group squads at about 15, 16, where I had to kind of make that tough decision.
And how was that for you? How was that for you as a mum watching that?
Well, I think obviously because Emily was talented in her age group at both sports, it was very difficult then to know which pathway she was going to go along. To be able to keep them both going, it was relatively easily sort of in her early teenage years, because obviously tennis is more a summer sport and hockey more of a winter sport. The decisions needed to be made though when Emily got to about 14, 15, and you had the junior regional performance centres which were held during the summer months, and they were often during the week, and we found they were clashing a lot with tennis tournaments. And obviously the tennis tournaments are where you are able to pick up your ratings and, you know, how you're able to progress. And if you're not taking part in those tennis tournaments, then it's very difficult to get beyond a certain level, isn't it? So I think that's really when the decision had to be made, in that you were still playing tennis, still playing junior club tennis, but in terms of taking the sport on to the next level, I think that's when the decision came from your point of view that you wanted to carry on with the hockey. And it, you know, I was guiding because I obviously am a hockey fan, but I love tennis. So if Emily had gone down the tennis route, that would have been absolutely fine. But I think Emily was always going to be a team sport player. That's what you've always liked to do. So, you know, that's how it happened.
And so, where have there been bumps in your journey there, Emily? What have been the difficult bits that have got? I mean, you've been out injured last season a little bit, and then we had lockdown and things like that, haven't we? But what other bumps have you gone through that you think that have helped develop your resilience? And also, Jill, what's that been like as mum on the sideline as Emily's gone through those things?
There's honestly been too many to keep count of. I think, you know, throughout sport, whatever level you play at, it's never a straightforward path. And I mean, you'd always speak to everyone involved in sport, and they've always had a kind of blip or an injury they've picked up or a bad result. And it's never plain sailing. And I think that's something that I learned quite early on in my hockey journey. So, for example, for the very first under 16 England tournament, it was a Four Nations tournament over Easter weekend of 2010, and it was the first tournament of the season, and I was named as a non-travelling reserve. Now, this was the very first tournament of my, you know, junior international career, and at that moment I was absolutely heartbroken. I remember getting the email, we were actually at tennis, and I just finished a tennis training session, and I opened the email in the car, and it said that I was a non-travelling reserve. And, you know, at the age of 15, you know, I was quite, you know, I was full of beans. This was it. This was my life, as you can imagine. And to have that disappointment that I hadn't necessarily experienced in my hockey journey to date, is that it had been pretty plain sailing in terms of straightforward up until then. It was a big shock, and I still, you know, hold that moment so strongly as, you know, that's one of the moments that kind of made me into the hockey player and the person that I am now. Because after that tournament and that initial disappointment, I then I got selected for absolutely every tournament, every match for the rest of my national age group squad experience. So that's through the under 16s, under 18s, under 21s, under 23s, throughout then. And I think, honestly, if I didn't have that setback back then, the very first tournament, I would question whether I had the same desire, hunger to, you know, continue to improve and persevere with my hockey as I did. And that's just one of many. I've had many, you know, disappointments and setbacks, even over the last 4 years since joining the senior Great Britain side. I mean, I've had my own fair share of injuries. I've had my own fair share of disappointing losses or non-selections, but unfortunately that's part and parcel of elite sport, and it's actually how you bounce back from those disappointments that actually make you as a person, as a player.
So you got this email in the car. Yeah. Jill, what was that moment like for you?
There was quite a lot of silence initially, and I think over the years sort of realised that it's no good when you're in that situation. It's happened. My attitude with it, right, okay, this is what's happened, so how are we going to go on from this? It's no good phoning up the coach and saying what's going on with a load of rubbish, but you can phone up the coach and say I was bitterly disappointed. And this is Emily's responsibility, not mine as a parent, because at 15, they're having the conversations with the coaches, and
how did you help her get ready to do that then?
Well, so it's no good saying things like, I know I'm better than this player and I don't know why this player's in it. You don't think about anybody else. My view is make it about you and just say, I was very disappointed, happy to be the travelling reserve, but what can I do now to make you put me in a better place for selection next time round? And then whatever you're then putting that onto the coach, of how the coach then is going to almost go through his thought process of why you weren't selected, and hopefully you've got a good coach that's going to guide you. As a parent, you at that time, as Emily said, up until then her journey had been, not saying it was easy, because she obviously had to work hard, but she did manage to find that all the selections through junior county level, the regional level, had gone quite straight. So it was your very first one, and obviously our first one to be able to pick her up from. And I think sometimes you just got to let it sink in. Don't start asking the questions. Don't go asking how you're feeling. You know how you're feeling, and you're bitterly disappointed yourself. My husband gets bitterly disappointed, probably more so than we do, because
that's probably the worst.
Yeah, but I think he just sees how upset Emily is about the situation, and you think, well, what can you do to put it right? And all you can do is to say, right, what can I do now to put myself in a better position for next time, and sort of guide through.
I can't tell you how much I love that, Jill. It's almost like you gave her the copy of my book I sent you.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
What are the differences then, Emily? Because obviously Dad, you sense that Dad feels it more. What are the differences between Mum and Dad with those conversations then? Because I often think we expect both parents to be like robotically similar in what they do, and I think it's great if different parents give a different perspective and a different angle on things. So what are the slight differences between your Mum and Dad and how they respond to the challenges and the joys?
Yeah, no, I do think Mum and Dad handle it all quite differently, but collectively I always find Mum and Dad the right spot on with their support. So even in the crowd, so Mum and Dad, I'm very lucky and feel very grateful that Mum and Dad come and watch most of my Great Britain England games, and you always watch in the crowd and you see Dad, who's probably a nervous wreck, and then Mum just like excited with a flag in her hands, and it's very similar to handling those knocks and setbacks. I'd say Mum's probably more talkative, okay, let's look more forward, have a forward mindset, really supportive in terms of maybe suggesting, as she said, contacting the coach or figuring out where you can go with this, whereas Dad's he probably won't say as much, but actually I know that he is so supportive, and he'll come up and give us a hug and stuff like that. And, I know that Dad's feeling it probably more so than me, because he just wants me to do so well. So I'm really, really lucky that, I have got Mum and Dad through the highs and more importantly for me, for the lows as well.
Brilliant. And your brothers, it helped having big brothers to stretch you and test you? And
absolutely. I mean, they're my idols, honestly. I mean, they're 32, 28, and I still look at them like they're the heroes. But even from a young age, I said that sport was always a big part of all of our childhoods, and we have a real shared passion for sport. And because I think that they have that love of all sport anyway. I mean, James doesn't play hockey, but Alex used to play. But irrespective of that, they just love sport, and they are so supportive. Like they'll come to watched some of my games. So they both took time off work and flew out to Belgium last summer to see me get my 50th international cap. I didn't know that were coming, and they travelled there and back in a day just to see this one game of hockey. And it's just things like that. I have a lot to thank them for as well, in terms of, you know, how I've developed into the hockey player that I am now. But yeah, they're great.
That's brilliant. I love it. And I love that difference between your parents, because we kind of do. It's good that your mum hits that pragmatic, right, what's now, but then, you know, you're not going to get that from your dad as well, because there are times when you want that pragmatic stuff, and there are times when you don't want it. And I'm sure your mum's good at reading that and switching that off at times as well, but it's just good to have that, like you say, in the collective. They're really good at that.
I think Emily had said there have been, well, lots of lows, but there have been times when you think, okay, you know, maybe preparing yourself possibly for a selection. Is she going to make it? She's not going to make it, and she makes it, and you think, thank goodness for that. It's all big hugs and celebration. Then maybe sort of the selection doesn't go quite so well, because we've been through it before. We know how it works. Now Emily likes a little bit of time to herself to collect her thoughts, and then it's a case of, you know, right, come on, let's get ourselves going here and see what you need to do to put it right. So, but it's worked. You know, it works quite well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Brilliant. I love it. Now, I mean, one of the things I just want to briefly touch on, I appreciate your mum's view on it, is I know that you, I mean, you come across so positive and bubbly, but one of the things that you found frustrating in the hockey world is being pigeonholed as an Essex girl, isn't it? That has frustrated you. And I love how you're trying to stretch that box but tell us a little bit more about that and what you're trying to do, and because I think the whole identity of young girls and young boys in sport is just so massive, and it's gutting that regional stereotypes still perpetuate like that. But so just tell us a bit more.
Yeah, it's something I'm hugely passionate about. I think you know, I grew up playing hockey, started playing when I was about 6-7 years old, because obviously mum was involved in the sport herself, and since then I've had nothing but positive experiences within the sport, and I've obviously, you know, been very fortunate to reach the highest level. But I'm all too aware that hockey is predominantly played by white public private school children, and having gone to a state school myself, I was very lucky that the school I went to had hockey as part of their curriculum. So it was part of, you know, our school life. Don't get me wrong, we didn't have half the amount of contact time and resources that, you know, some of these other private schools that specialise in hockey do. So I feel very fortunate in the fact that I played hockey at school, and that has obviously had, I don't know how much of an impact it had, but I do think it has had an impact in the position that I'm in today as a Great Britain and England hockey player. But on the flip side, I do think, you know, there's schools 5 minutes down the road from where I went to school, whereby hockey is not part of the curriculum. They don't maybe have, you know, a teacher willing to take that responsibility on and deliver hockey as part of their curriculum. And I think, you know, I feel very passionate about, especially in schools and for children, that everyone should try and have that equal opportunity. And I think, you know, the private school, state school kind of clash of the access you can get to hockey is quite unequal at the moment. And I suppose with that comes, you know, the progress that I've made throughout my hockey career. I have kind of been that one, you know, the girl from the state school, the girl from Essex. I sound completely different to all of my Great Britain hockey teammates. You know, I can't remember what the percentage of the squad is from state school education, but it's nowhere near equal. And I think, you know, for me, I've been very fortunate in the fact that I have made it to the level that I have, but I would hate for the fact to have had like someone making a comment about the way I talk, a comment about the school I went to or the friends I have, which I have had in the past, that would stop me from playing hockey or prevent me from playing any form of sport because of this. And, you know, with the social media pressures on teenagers in particular right now, it's something I feel quite passionate about, as you can probably tell.
No, mate, I think it's a great crusade. I think it's brilliant. And if people are watching this, just Google Emily, because she's appeared on a number of podcasts and been on some good interviews recently. And I think the stats about particularly young girls' activity levels is just frightening, about how many young teenage girls are not doing enough physical activity. I mean, the stats for boys aren't great, but but the girls compared to the boys, I mean, boys are doing a lot better than the girls are. But so I think, yes, I think we need to be making sport far more accessible to all abilities. You know, if because we will be missing out on kids who could be GB athletes because they don't have access. But actually, we want lifelong enjoyment of being physical, and we know what that does for society. We know that what it does for individuals. So I think that's absolutely brilliant. Absolutely.
I think it's spot on with that, and I think as well, I've been very lucky, as I've touched upon already, that throughout my childhood, sport was kind of the norm for our family. And you know, mum and dad and my two brothers, James and Alex, they were always very supportive of their younger sister, their daughter, to participate in sport. But actually, again, I'm all too aware that that's not necessarily the same with most other families. And actually, as you said, you know, this is the time where we can make a change, especially over the last few months and what's happened in this crazy world. Actually, you know, we should be encouraging young girls, young boys to participate in sport now more than ever. You know, it's not just the health benefits that it has, it's the, you know, mental aspect, it's the social side of things, it's the whole parcel. And for me, I think, you know, school sport is a huge part of that, and something, that I think, you know, we really need to tackle whilst we can.
Brilliant, thank you very much, Jill and Emily. This has been a brilliant conversation. I thoroughly love the fact that you were saved from being a West Ham fan, but also just how I just really appreciated your honesty today, and just Jill, I really appreciate how you've just talked about helping Emily scaffold way forwards and thinking, right, we've got this roadblock in front of us, how we're going to get around it, what we're going to do, and also empowering her to talk to the coaches, because I think one of the things that I think about my own kids when they have conflict with their teachers or coaches, this is a great opportunity for them to learn how to manage these difficult moments, how to practice having difficult conversations. And there are some times when I've emailed my kids' school to say, I'm not quite sure about this. But in our household, it goes, right, can you email your teacher? Can you go and speak to your teacher? You're afraid, okay, let's practice that. So it's upskilling the kids, because ultimately we can't be there forever for them in those conversations, can we? And I think the way you practice that with her, Jill, is part of the reason she's such an epic human being today. So,
I'll agree with that.
Well, ladies, thank you so much again. Check out Emily on Instagram, and because she just does put up some really, really useful stuff up there. And ladies, thank you. It's been a really, really useful conversation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.